They killed her for being human. The Alpha King was supposed to finish her. Instead, his pup chose her and rejected destiny. If you love stories where fate gets defied and the powerless rise to power, subscribe to Megan Romance Audiobooks so you never miss an upload. Now, let's begin. They said she didn't belong. Not whispered behind closed doors. Not debated in council chambers. It was declared in the town square at dawn, with the entire pack circling her like wolves around wounded prey. Human, they called her. Not her name. Never her name. She stood at the edge of a sacred cliff, wrists bound with silver-laced rope that burned even though she had no wolf to suppress. The morning air bit at her skin. Below, the river roared, a sound like the earth swallowing itself. Alpha Garen stood beside her. The man who had raised her. The man who had promised her a place in the pack even without a wolf.
He didn't look at her now.
The laws are clear, he said, voice flat and ceremonial. A human cannot carry pack blood. A human cannot walk sacred ground. A human cannot remain. She wanted to scream.
To beg.
To remind him of the nights he'd told her she was enough. But her throat had closed hours ago. The pack watched in silence. Some looked bored. Others looked relieved. A few children peeked between their parents' legs, curious about the spectacle. No one protested. No one even flinched. You were a mistake we tried to correct, Garen continued, reading from a scroll he didn't need. But weakness cannot be tolerated. Impurity cannot be hidden. You will be returned to the earth, where you should have stayed. Returned. As if she'd been borrowed. One of the elders stepped forward, a woman with silver streaking her dark hair. She dipped her fingers into a clay bowl and smeared ash across the FMC's forehead. Erased, the elder said softly. Forgotten. Kin like a brand. She looked at Garen one last time. Searched his face for something, anything, that resembled the man who had once defended her. He turned his back. Proceed. Two enforcers grabbed her by the arms. She didn't fight. What would be the point? They dragged her to the edge. The wind howled. The river screamed. She closed her eyes. And then, nothing but air. The fall was longer than she expected. Cold ripped through her chest. Her body twisted, weightless and wrong. She couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
The world blurred into gray and white, and the savage roar of water rising to meet her. Impact. The river swallowed her whole. Cold became pain. Pain became pressure. Her lungs burned. She thrashed, but the current didn't care. It pulled her under, rolled her like a stone, dragged her downstream with the indifference of nature. Her vision darkened. Her limbs went slack. This was it. This was how it ended. The world fell silent. But the river refused to let her rest. It carried her for miles, through rapids, under fallen trees, past boundaries no human should ever cross. Her body caught on rocks, spun through eddies, surfaced and surfaced again. By the time the current spat her onto a muddy bank, she wasn't conscious enough to know where she was. She only knew she was still breathing.
Barely.
When she opened her eyes, the sky was wrong. Darker. Heavier. The trees were taller here, their branches twisted like claws. The air tasted different, sharp, electric, ancient. She tried to sit up and failed. Her body screamed in protest. Bruises bloomed across her ribs. Blood crusted her temple. The silver burns on her wrists had blistered. But she was alive. Somehow, impossibly, she was alive. A sound broke the silence. Footsteps.
No, pose.
Her head snapped toward the tree-line, heart hammering. A massive wolf emerged from the shadows. Black as midnight, eyes like molten gold. It moved with the lethal grace of something that had never known fear. The Alpha King. She knew it instantly. Felt it in her bones. This was his territory. The forbidden domain. The place even her old pack wouldn't dare enter. And she had washed up on his doorstep like garbage. The wolf stopped 10 feet away. Stared at her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She should run. She couldn't even stand. The wolf's lips pulled back, revealing fangs the size of daggers. This was it. The real execution. But then a sound. Small. High-pitched. A pup. It tumbled out of the underbrush, all oversized paws and fluffy black fur. It yipped excitedly and bolted straight toward her, ignoring the Alpha King's warning growl. The pup reached her first, and without hesitation, it pressed its tiny body against her side, nuzzling into her ribs like she was home. The Alpha King went completely still. The pup looked up at its father, tail wagging, eyes bright with absolute certainty. And in that moment, the FMC understood. The pup had chosen her. The Alpha King's heir had rejected fate itself, and nothing would ever be the same. Next time, the Alpha King's impossible choice: kill the human, or defy every law his kingdom was built on. Chapter 2. The River That Refused Fate. The Alpha King didn't move. His golden eyes locked onto the pup, his son, his heir, the future of his bloodline, currently curled against a dying human like she was Pac. This wasn't possible. Pups didn't bond with strangers. They didn't disobey instinct. And they certainly didn't choose humans over their own kind. But here it was, happening. Undeniable. The pup whined softly, nudging the FMC's arm with his nose. She flinched, barely conscious, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Blood seeped from a gash above her eye. Her skin was pale, bruised, broken. She should be dead. The Alpha King took a step forward. The pup's ears flattened. A tiny, ridiculous growl rumbled from his chest. Protecting her. The Alpha King froze. His son, barely 8 weeks old, was challenging him. Over a human. Over a trespasser who had violated the most sacred law of his territory. Kill her, his instinct screamed. End this now. But the pup pressed closer to the woman, his small body trembling with defiance. The Alpha King shifted. The transformation was seamless. Bones cracked and reformed. Fur melted into skin. Within seconds, he stood in his human form, tall, broad-shouldered, every inch a king. His voice came out low and controlled.
Cade.
Move. The pup didn't budge. Cade. Sharper now. A command that had made generals kneel. The pup whimpered, but stayed exactly where he was. The Alpha King's jaw tightened. He'd never had to repeat himself. Not to anyone. Not even his own son. He crouched low, eyes narrowing. She's human. She doesn't belong here. She can't stay. Cade looked up at him with those impossibly wide eyes, eyes that still held the innocence of a child who believed the world was fair. And then the pup did something unthinkable. He licked the woman's hand. A claim. The Alpha King's breath caught. In their world, a claim was sacred, binding. It didn't matter if it came from a pup or a king. Once made, it couldn't be undone without consequences. No, the Alpha King said, voice barely above a whisper.
No, Gade.
You don't understand what you're doing. But the pup curled tighter against her, his tiny heartbeat syncing with hers. The Alpha King stood abruptly, running a hand through his dark hair. His mind raced. If he killed her now, he'd be killing his son's first chosen bond. Pups who lost their first claim often grew unstable, violent, broken. Some never recovered. But if he let her live, his advisors would demand her death. The council would call it treason. And the destined mate, his fated queen, chosen by prophecy itself, would see this as an insult that could fracture the entire pack. He looked down at the woman again. She was nothing. A discarded human, half-drowned and bleeding out on his land. She had no power, no status, no reason to be alive. But fate had delivered her here. And his son had chosen her. The woman's eyes fluttered open. She stared up at him, dazed and disoriented. Her gaze traveled from his face to the pup beside her, and something like confusion flickered across her features. Where? Her voice cracked. Where am I? Somewhere you shouldn't be, the Alpha King said coldly. She tried to sit up and gasped, clutching her ribs. Pain twisted her face. The pup whined and pressed his nose against her cheek. She blinked at him, then at the Alpha King. Understanding dawned slowly. You're him, she whispered. The Alpha King. And you're trespassing. I didn't, she coughed, blood flecking her lips. I didn't mean to. I was thrown off the cliff. I should be dead. You are dead, he said flatly. The moment you entered my territory. Her breath hitched. Fear flooded her eyes, raw, honest human fear. Good. She should be afraid. Please, she said, voice breaking. I don't want to die. Not again. Not again. The words hung in the air like a wound. The Alpha King's expression didn't change. What you want is irrelevant. You're human. You don't belong in our world. I know. Her voice was so small. I've never belonged anywhere. The pup growled at him again, louder this time. The Alpha King's eyes snapped to his son. Cade. But the pup had already shifted his weight, placing himself between the woman and his father. A shield. The Alpha King stared at his heir. At the tiny creature who should have been learning to hunt, to fight, to lead, now choosing the weakest thing he'd ever encountered. It was madness. It was instinct. And instinct didn't lie. The Alpha King exhaled slowly, made his decision. She lives, he said, voice like stone. For now. The woman's eyes went wide. What? Don't misunderstand, he continued, stepping closer. This isn't mercy. My son has made a claim, and I won't break his first bond. But the moment he releases you, the moment his instinct fades, you're done. Understood? She nodded quickly, desperately. You'll stay in the East Wing. You won't speak to anyone. You won't leave your room. And if you so much as look at another wolf the wrong way, I'll finish what your pack started. I understand. Good. He turned to leave, then paused. And one more thing. She waited. My destined mate arrives in 3 days. She is prophesied to be queen. She is fated to rule beside me. And when she sees you, he let the silence stretch. Pray my son's claim is stronger than her wrath. He shifted back into his wolf form and disappeared into the trees. The woman sat there, trembling, the pup still curled against her side. She should have died on that cliff. She should have drowned in that river. But something, fate, chance, or sheer stubbornness, had refused to let her go. And now she was trapped in the one place more dangerous than death itself. The Alpha King's domain, with a pup who had chosen her, and a destined queen on the way. Next time, the destined mate arrives, and her smile hides something far worse than jealousy. Chapter 3. The Choice That Breaks Prophecy. The East Wing was a prison dressed as luxury. Marble floors, velvet curtains, a bed large enough to swallow her whole. Everything polished, pristine, untouched, and completely isolated. The FMC sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the torn, blood-stained clothes from her execution. No one had brought her anything. No food. No water.
No explanation.
Just silence. And the pup. Cade hadn't left her side since the river. He slept curled against her legs, his tiny body rising and falling with each breath. Every time she tried to move, he'd wake instantly, those golden eyes tracking her like she might disappear. She didn't understand it. She didn't understand any of this. A pup shouldn't bond with a human. It defied nature, defied logic. And yet here he was, refusing to leave her even when his father commanded it. A soft knock echoed through the room. She tensed. The door opened, and a woman stepped inside, older, silver-haired, carrying a tray of food. Her expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes betrayed her disgust. The Alpha King ordered this brought to you, the woman said stiffly, setting the tray on a side table.
Eat.
You're no use to anyone dead. The FMC's stomach twisted with hunger, but she didn't move. Thank you. The woman didn't acknowledge her. Instead, she looked at Cade, and something softened in her face. Poor thing, she murmured, bonded to something that won't last the week. The FMC flinched. The woman turned to leave, then paused at the door. A word of advice, human. When the destined mate arrives, don't look her in the eye. Don't speak unless spoken to. And whatever you do, don't let her see the pup with you. Why? The woman's smile was bitter. because she'll see it as the insult it is. And she doesn't forgive insults. The door closed. 3 days passed like a slow execution. The FMC was left alone except for the silent deliveries of food. No one spoke to her. No one explained what would happen next. But she heard things. Whispers in the hallways. Hurried footsteps. Preparations. The destined mate was coming. Cade sensed it too. He'd grown restless, pacing the room, ears twitching at every sound. Whenever the FMC tried to comfort him, he'd press against her leg and whine, a sound that broke her heart. "It's okay," she whispered, running her fingers through his soft fur. "You'll be fine. You don't need me." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. He'd claimed her, chosen her, and in their world, that meant something, even if it shouldn't. On the third night, everything changed. The door slammed open. The Alpha King stood in the doorway, his expression colder than she'd ever seen it. "Get up," he commanded. She scrambled to her feet, heart pounding. Cade immediately positioned himself between them, growling softly. "She's here," the Alpha King continued, ignoring his son. "The council has demanded your presence. They want to see the human who dared trespass on sacred ground." "I didn't. I don't care." His voice was ice. "You'll stand before them. You'll answer their questions. And you'll show the proper respect to your future queen." Future queen. The destined mate. The woman chosen by prophecy to stand beside him. The FMC's throat tightened. "And if I don't?" His eyes flashed gold. "Then I let them decide your fate. And trust me, it won't be quick." The council chamber was a cathedral of stone and shadow. Wolves lined the walls, elders, advisors, warriors. All of them watching her with barely concealed contempt. She walked forward slowly, Cade padding beside her despite the Alpha King's orders to leave him behind. The pup had refused, snapped at anyone who tried to separate them. So here they were, a human and a pup, standing before judgment. At the far end of the chamber, on a throne carved from black stone, sat the Alpha King. And beside him, the destined mate. She was breathtaking, tall, elegant, with hair like spun gold and eyes the color of winter storms. She wore a gown that seemed woven from moonlight itself, and every movement radiated grace and power. She looked like a queen. She looked like prophecy, made flesh. And when her gaze landed on the FMC, her smile was perfect. Too perfect. "So this is the human," the destined mate said, her voice smooth as silk. "The one who washed up on our shores like driftwood." The council murmured. The FMC kept her eyes down. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was executed," the destined mate finished, tilting her head. "Yes, I heard. Your own pack threw you away. How tragic." The word dripped with mockery. The Alpha King's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The destined mate stood, descending the steps with measured grace. She circled the FMC slowly, studying her like a specimen. "You're bleeding on the floor," she observed. "How unsightly." The FMC's fists clenched. The destined mate stopped in front of her, leaning close. "Tell me, little human, do you know what happens to things that don't belong?" Before the FMC could answer, Cade stepped forward. The pup placed himself directly between them, hackles raised, teeth bared, protecting her, choosing her. Again, the chamber went silent. The destined mate's smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. "Interesting," she said softly, straightening. She looked at the Alpha King. "Your heir seems confused." "He's young," the Alpha King said, voice carefully neutral. "He doesn't understand. He understands perfectly." The destined mate's eyes glittered with something dangerous. "He's chosen her over me." The council erupted. Voices overlapped. Outrage, disbelief, accusations. "This is an insult to prophecy. The pup must be corrected. The human should be removed immediately." The destined mate raised a hand, and silence fell. "I don't blame the child," she said calmly. "He's been poisoned by proximity to something unnatural. The solution is simple." She turned to the Alpha King. "Send the human away. Tonight. and the pup's instincts will realign. The Alpha King's gaze shifted to his son. Cade stood firm, trembling but unmoving, pressed against the FMC's leg. "No," the Alpha King said quietly. The destined mate blinked. "Excuse me? The claim has been made. Breaking it would damage him. I won't risk my heir for..." "For what?" The destined mate's voice sharpened. "For a human? For a creature without a wolf? You would choose her over destiny." "I'm choosing my son." The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. The destined mate's perfect smile returned. But this time, it didn't reach her eyes. "I see," she said softly. "Then I suppose we'll have to find another solution." She looked at the FMC one last time, and the promise in her gaze was clear. This wasn't over. Next time, the Alpha King faces an impossible dilemma, and the destined mate begins to play a far more dangerous game. Chapter 4. The Alpha King's Dilemma. The Alpha King didn't sleep that night. He stood on the balcony of his private chambers, staring out at the forest that stretched endlessly into darkness. The moon hung low and full, casting silver across the treetops. Behind him, the destined mate slept in silk sheets, her breathing soft and even. She'd said nothing after the council meeting. Just smiled that perfect smile and retired to his chambers as if nothing had happened. As if his son hadn't rejected her in front of the entire pack. As if prophecy itself hadn't cracked. The Alpha King's hands gripped the stone railing until his knuckles went white. He was trapped. On one side, destiny. A mate chosen by the moon goddess herself, prophesied to bring strength and unity to his bloodline. A queen who could solidify alliances, command respect, and ensure the future of his kingdom. On the other, a human. A broken, powerless creature who should have drowned in that river. Who had no right to be here. Who represented everything his pack despised. And between them, his son. A pup who had made a choice no one could explain. The Alpha King closed his eyes. He'd built his entire reign on law, on order, on the belief that fate knew better than individual desire. But now fate was asking him to break his own son. And he didn't know if he could. "You're troubled." He turned. The destined mate stood in the doorway, wrapped in a robe that shimmered like starlight. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, and her expression was soft, concerned. "Perfect. Always perfect." "I'm fine," he said. She crossed the room slowly, her bare feet silent on the stone. When she reached him, she placed a delicate hand on his arm. "You don't have to lie to me," she said gently. "I know the situation is difficult." Difficult. He almost laughed. "That's one word for it. The human has disrupted everything," she continued, her voice soothing. "The council is questioning your judgment. The pack is confused. And your son." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "Your son is bonding with something that will only bring him pain." The Alpha King said nothing. "I don't blame you for hesitating," she went on. "You're a father. You want to protect him. But sometimes protection means making the hard choice." "And what choice is that?" Her eyes met his, clear and steady. "Send her away. Tonight. Quietly. The pup will grieve. Yes, but he'll heal. Children are resilient. And once she's gone, his instincts will settle. He'll accept me. Accept his destiny." It was logical. Reasonable. The kind of advice a queen should give. But something in her tone made his skin crawl. "And if I refuse," he asked quietly. Her smile didn't falter. "Then you'll be choosing chaos over prophecy. Weakness over strength. A human over your own kingdom." "I'd be choosing my son."
"No."
Her hand tightened on his arm. "You'd be indulging a child's mistake. And mistakes, my king, have consequences." The threat was subtle, wrapped in silk, but it was there. The Alpha King pulled his arm free. "She stays. Until Cade's bond weakens naturally." The destined mate's expression didn't change. But something flickered in her eyes, something cold and calculating. "As you wish," she said softly. "But know this. The longer she remains, the harder it will be to undo the damage." She turned and glided back into the chamber, leaving him alone with the weight of his decision. By dawn, the whispers had started. The Alpha King heard them as he walked through the halls. Servants fell silent when he passed. Guards exchanged glances. Even his own advisors avoided his gaze. The human was still here. The destined mate had been insulted, and the Alpha King had chosen wrong. He found his head advisor waiting outside the war room, a grizzled wolf named Theron who had served his father and grandfather before him. "We need to talk," Theron said, without preamble. The Alpha King gestured him inside. Theron closed the door and turned, his expression grave. "The council is fracturing. Half believe you're protecting your son. The other half believe you're bewitched." Bewitched? The Alpha King's voice was flat. By a half-dead human. Stranger things have happened, and the destined mate is feeding the rumors. That caught his attention. "What do you mean?" Theron hesitated. "She's been talking. To the council. To the elders. Suggesting that the human may have used dark magic to survive the river. That she may be influencing Cade somehow." "That's absurd." "Is it?" Theron's eyes hardened. "A human survives a fall that should have killed her. Washes up on your shores the same day your destined mate is set to arrive. And within hours, your heir, who has never bonded with anyone, chooses her over his own kind. You don't find that convenient." The Alpha King's jaw tightened. Cade is a pup. He doesn't understand politics or prophecy. He acted on instinct. Instinct can be manipulated. Not by someone barely conscious. "Then explain it," Theron pressed. "Because I can't. And neither can the pack. And the longer you protect her, the more they'll believe she's a threat." The Alpha King turned away, staring at the maps spread across the table. Territories. Borders. Alliances. Everything he'd built. Everything he'd sworn to protect. "What would you have me do?" he asked quietly. "Test her," Theron said, publicly. "Prove she has no power over the pup. And if she fails..." He let the sentence hang. The Alpha King's hands curled into fists. He could order the test. Watch the human fail. Let the council take her. IT would solve everything. Restore order. Please the destined mate. Quiet the whispers. All it would cost was a broken bond, and his son's trust. That afternoon, the Alpha King stood outside the East Wing. He could hear Cade inside, yipping and playing. Could hear the human's soft laughter, the first time he'd heard her sound even remotely at ease. His hand hovered over the door. One command. That's all it would take. "Come with me. Face the test. Prove you're nothing." But when he opened the door, the words died in his throat. Cade had shifted into his human form, a small boy with dark curls and golden eyes. He sat on the floor, showing the woman a collection of smooth stones he'd gathered from the river. "This one's my favorite," the boy said, holding up a black stone flecked with silver. "It looks like the moon." The woman smiled, tired, sad, but genuine. "It's beautiful." "You can have it," Cade said, pressing it into her palm. "So, you remember you're safe here." Her eyes filled with tears. The Alpha King stepped back into the hallway, closed the door, and realized he'd already made his choice, even if it destroyed everything. Next time, the destined mate's perfect mask begins to slip, and her cruelty is far worse than anyone imagined. Chapter 5. The Destined Mate's Smile. The destined mate's name was Seraphine. It meant Burning One. The FMC learned this from the servants who whispered it like a prayer or a warning. Seraphine was everything the FMC wasn't. Powerful. Beautiful. Born under a blood moon with the prophecy etched into her very bones. The elders had known since her birth that she would be queen. And she knew it too. The FMC saw it in the way Seraphine moved through the halls, head high, spine straight, every gesture deliberate. Wolves bowed as she passed. Elders sought her counsel. Even the Alpha King's most hardened warriors softened in her presence. She was perfection. And perfection, the FMC was learning, could be cruel. It started small. A servant delivered the FMC's breakfast late. The food was cold, the bread stale. When she asked why, the girl's eyes darted nervously toward the door. Lady Seraphine suggested we prioritize the important guests first, she whispered. The FMC said nothing. The next day, her room wasn't cleaned. The fireplace went unlit despite the cold. Her requests for fresh bandages were ignored. Still, she stayed silent. But Cade noticed. Why is it so cold in here? The boy asked, shivering as he curled against her on the third night. It's fine, the FMC lied, wrapping the thin blanket around his small shoulders. No, it's not. His golden eyes, so much like his father's, narrowed with a child's sense of injustice. I'll tell father. Don't. She caught his hand. Please. It'll only make things worse. But you're freezing.
Eve survived verse.
It was the truth. But the look on Cade's face broke something inside her. He shouldn't have to worry about her. He was a child. He should be playing, learning, growing, not protecting a human who didn't belong. But he refused to leave. And every night, he brought her stones. Smooth ones from the river. To remind you, he'd say. She never asked what they were supposed to remind her of. She was afraid of the answer. On the 5th day, Seraphine requested an audience with her. The summons came through a guard. Formal, polite, unavoidable. The FMC's stomach twisted. She'd been avoiding Seraphine since the council meeting. Staying in her room. Keeping Cade close. Hoping to remain invisible. But invisibility, it seemed, was no longer an option. Seraphine's chambers were stunning. White marble, gold accents, flowers that bloomed despite the season. Everything was light and warmth and luxury. The exact opposite of the East Wing. Seraphine sat by the window, sunlight streaming through her golden hair. She looked like a painting, like something divine. Sit, she said without looking up. The FMC sat. For a long moment, Seraphine said nothing. Just sipped her tea, gaze fixed on the gardens below. Finally, she spoke. You're wondering why I asked you here? Yes. I wanted to see you. Really see you. Seraphine turned, her winter storm eyes locking onto the FMC. To understand what a pup could possibly see in something so ordinary. The word stung more than it should have. I don't know, the FMC said quietly. I didn't ask for this. No, I suppose you didn't. Seraphine set down her cup. But you accepted it. You let him bond with you. You let him claim you. I was barely conscious. And yet here you are. Seraphine's smile was soft, sympathetic. Still breathing. Still taking up space in a world that has no place for you. The FMC's hands clenched in her lap. Seraphine stood, moving with that effortless grace. She circled the FMC slowly, like a predator assessing prey. Do you know what prophecy said about me? She asked, voice light. That I would unite kingdoms. That my children would be legends. That I would stand beside the Alpha King and bring an era of peace. She stopped in front of the FMC. And then you washed up on shore, she continued. A human. A nothing. And suddenly, everything I was promised is being questioned because a child made a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, the FMC said before she could stop herself. Seraphine's smile widened. Oh, Cade didn't choose me to hurt you. He just felt something. Children don't lie about what they feel. No, Seraphine agreed. They don't. But they can be taught, corrected, guided toward better choices. The air in the room shifted. What are you saying? The FMC asked carefully. Seraphine leaned down, her face inches away. I'm saying that children are resilient. They adapt. They forget. Especially when the thing they're attached to disappears. The FMC's blood went cold. I'm not asking you to die, Seraphine continued, straightening. I'm asking you to leave. Quietly. Tonight. Walk into the forest and don't come back. Cade will cry. He'll search for you. But eventually he'll move on. And I'll make sure he's cared for. Loved. Protected. You want me to abandon him. I want you to do what's best for him. Seraphine's expression softened into something almost pitying. You're human. You'll age. Weaken. And when you do, Cade will be devastated. But if you leave now, while he's young, he'll heal. He'll forget. And he'll accept the life he was always meant to have. It was logical, reasonable, kind, even. But the FMC saw the truth beneath the words. Seraphine didn't care about Cade. She cared about control. And if I refuse? The FMC asked. Seraphine's smile never wavered. Then I'll make sure you wish you hadn't. That night, the FMC's door was locked from the outside.
No explanation.
No warning. Just the heavy click of the bolt sliding into place. She pressed her ear against the wood, listening. Footsteps. Voices. Movement. And then Cade's scream. Let me go. I want to see her. Let me go. The FMC slammed her fists against the door. Cade. She's fine, a guard's voice said from the other side. Lady Seraphine's orders. The boy needs space from you. He needs me. He needs to learn discipline. The FMC's heart pounded. She threw herself against the door, but it didn't budge. Cade's cries grew fainter. And then, silence. Hours passed. The FMC sat on the floor, back against the door, knees pulled to her chest. She'd survived execution. Survived drowning. Survived a world that hated her. But this? Listening to a child cry for her while she sat trapped and useless? This was worse than death. A soft sound broke the silence. Scratching. At the door. Cade, she whispered. A small, folded note slid under the gap. She grabbed it, hands shaking. They're going to take you tomorrow. To the cliffs. Seraphine convinced the council you're dangerous. Father tried to stop it, but he's outvoted.
Run. K.
The FMC stared at the note. Seraphine had won. And tomorrow, the Alpha King's protection wouldn't be enough. Next time, a human among wolves, and the pack's hatred finally erupts. Chapter 6, A Human Among Wolves. The FMC didn't run. She should have. The note made it clear, stay and die, leave and live. But Cade's handwriting was shaky. Desperate. Written by a child who believed the world was about to take away the one person who made him feel safe. She couldn't do that to him, even if it killed her. When the guards came at dawn, she was ready. They didn't speak, just unlocked the door and gestured for her to follow. She walked through the halls with her head high, even as wolves stopped to stare. Some looked curious, others disgusted. A few whispered behind their hands. Human. Unnatural. She'll be gone by nightfall. The FMC kept her eyes forward. They led her to the central courtyard, a massive open space surrounded by stone columns. The entire pack had gathered. Hundreds of wolves in human and animal form, circling the space like a coliseum. At the center stood a platform, and on it, the council, the Alpha King, and Seraphine. Seraphine's smile was radiant as the FMC was brought forward. Thank you all for coming, Seraphine addressed the crowd, her voice carrying effortlessly. Today, we address a matter that threatens the very foundation of our pack. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The FMC's wrists were bound, not with silver this time, but with iron. Cold and heavy. She scanned the crowd, searching. And then she saw him.
Cade.
In his human form, standing beside his father. His small face was pale, eyes red from crying. He tried to step forward, but the Alpha King's hand on his shoulder held him back. Their eyes met.
I'm sorry, Cade mouthed.
The FMC shook her head slightly. It's okay. It wasn't. But she needed him to believe it. Seraphine continued. This human was found on our sacred shores. A trespasser. An outsider. And yet, she has been permitted to remain among us because of a pup's misguided instinct. The crowd shifted. Some nodded. Others looked uncertain. But instinct, Seraphine said softly, can be wrong, especially when it's been influenced. The word hung in the air like poison. Influenced. One of the elders called out. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting nothing, Seraphine interrupted smoothly. I'm simply asking questions. How does a human survive a fall that would kill even our strongest wolves? How does she appear on our shores the very day prophecy is meant to be fulfilled? And how does she manage to claim the heir's loyalty within hours of arrival? She turned to the FMC, tilting her head. Unless, of course, there's something we don't know about you. The FMC's pulse quickened. I didn't do anything. I was thrown off a cliff. I should have died. I don't know why I didn't. Convenient, Seraphine murmured. That you remember nothing useful. I remember drowning. I remember pain. I remember waking up half dead on a riverbank. The FMC's voice grew stronger. I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask for any of this. And yet you stayed, Seraphine countered. You bonded with the air. You allowed him to claim you, knowing it would disrupt prophecy itself. He's a child, the FMC shot back. He was scared and alone, and he chose kindness. That's not manipulation. That's innocence. A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. No one spoke to Seraphine like that. Seraphine's smile tightened. Innocence, she repeated. How noble. But innocence doesn't survive in our world. Only strength does. And you, human, have none. She gestured to the guards. Prove it. Shift. The FMC's stomach dropped. What? You heard me.
Shift.
Show us your wolf. Prove you belong here. I don't have a wolf. You know that. Then you admit you're powerless. I admit I'm human. That doesn't make me worthless. Seraphine finished. Weak. A liability. She turned to the crowd. This is what the air has bonded with. A creature without claws. Without fangs. Without even the instinct to protect herself. The crowd murmured louder now. The Alpha King stepped forward. Enough, Seraphine. Enough. She turned to him, eyes wide with false innocence. I'm simply demonstrating the truth. She cannot fight. She cannot defend. She cannot even survive without our protection. And you would risk your son's future for this. My son made a choice. Your son is 8 weeks old, Seraphine snapped, her composure cracking for just a moment. He doesn't understand what he's chosen. But you do. And yet you allow this farce to continue. The Alpha King's jaw tightened. Seraphine turned back to the crowd, her voice softening. I understand the king's hesitation. He's a father. He wants to protect his son's feelings. But feelings fade. Prophecy does not. She gestured to the FMC. This human is a distraction. A mistake. And if we don't correct it now, we risk everything our ancestors built. The crowd erupted. Some shouted in agreement. Others argued back. The noise swelled until it was deafening. And through it all, Cade stood frozen, tears streaming down his face. Enough! The Alpha King's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Silence fell. He stepped forward, his presence commanding absolute attention. The human stays. Until the bond breaks naturally, she remains under my protection. And if it doesn't break? Seraphine asked quietly. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. Seraphine's eyes glittered. Very well. But protection has limits, my king. Even yours. She descended from the platform, walking past the FMC without a glance. But as she passed, she whispered, just loud enough for the FMC to hear. He can't watch you every moment. And when he looks away, I'll be waiting. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly. The FMC stood alone in the courtyard, wrists still bound, heart still racing. She'd survived.
For now.
But Seraphine's words echoed in her mind. When he looks away. That night, Cade was finally allowed to return to her. He ran into the room and threw his arms around her waist, sobbing. I thought they'd take you, he choked out. I thought you'd be gone. The FMC held him tightly, her own tears falling. I'm still here. Promise you won't leave.
She wanted to.
Wanted to promise him safety and certainty and a future where he didn't have to fight for her. But she couldn't lie to him. I promise, she whispered, that I'll stay as long as you need me. Cade pulled back, eyes fierce despite the tears. I'll always need you. The FMC's heart broke. Because she knew what he didn't. In this world, need wasn't enough. And loving someone powerless was the most dangerous thing a wolf could do. Next time, fate strikes back and Seraphine's patience finally runs out. Chapter 7, Fate Strikes Back. The attack came 3 nights later. The FMC woke to the sound of shattering glass. She bolted upright, heart hammering. Moonlight streamed through the broken window, illuminating shards scattered across the floor. And standing in the center of the room, 3 wolves. Not guards. Not servants. Assassins. Their eyes gleamed in the darkness, lips pulled back to reveal fangs. They moved with the silent coordination of a pack trained to kill. The FMC scrambled backward, her back hitting the headboard. "Who sent you?" They didn't answer. The largest one lunged. She rolled sideways, barely avoiding teeth that snapped inches from her throat. Her feet hit the floor, and she ran, not toward the door, but toward Cade's small bed in the corner. The boy was already awake, eyes wide with terror. "Stay behind me," she ordered, positioning herself between him and the wolves. It was pathetic, laughable. A human with no claws, no fangs, no power, trying to protect an alpha's heir from trained killers. But she didn't move. The second wolf circled left. The third went right. They were hurting her, separating her from the door. "Cade," she said quietly, not taking her eyes off the wolves. "When I say run, you run. Straight to your father. Don't look back. I won't leave you. You have to." The largest wolf charged again. This time, she wasn't fast enough. Claws raked across her shoulder. Pain exploded through her arm. Blood sprayed, hot across her skin. She screamed. Cade shifted instantly, his small wolf form erupting with a child's rage. He threw himself at the attacker, teeth sinking into its leg. The wolf yelped and shook him off like a pest. Cade hit the wall with a sickening thud. "No." The FMC lunged for him, but the second wolf blocked her path.
Trapped.
The assassins closed in. And then, the door exploded inward. The Alpha King moved like death itself. One moment he was at the threshold. The next, he hit the largest wolf by the throat, slamming it into the ground with enough force to crack stone. The other 2 assassins froze. "You dare," the Alpha King snarled, his voice barely human. "Enter my home. Attack my son. And think you'll leave alive?" The wolf beneath him whimpered. The Alpha King's claws extended.
"Who sent you?"
Silence. He tightened his grip. Bones cracked. "Answer me." "Lady Seraphine." The wolf choked out. She said the human was corrupting the air, that she needed to be removed, for the good of the pack. The Alpha King went completely still. Then he looked at the FMC, bleeding, shaking, standing in front of his son like a broken shield. Something shifted in his expression. "Get out," he said quietly. The assassins didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled for the window and disappeared into the night. The Alpha King crossed the room in 3 strides. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands hovering over her wounded shoulder.
"I've fine."
Check Cade. But Cade was already shifting back, throwing himself into his father's arms. They tried to kill her. They were going to. "I know." The Alpha King held his son tightly, his jaw clenched. "I know." He looked at the FMC over Cade's head. And for the first time, she saw something other than duty in his eyes.
Guilt.
Within the hour, Seraphine was summoned. She arrived in a silk robe, hair perfectly arranged despite the late hour. Her expression was one of gentle concern. "My king," she said softly. "What's happened? I heard there was You sent assassins." His voice was ice. "Into my home. To kill a woman under my protection." Seraphine blinked. I don't understand. Assassins? My king, I would never." They confessed. Her face paled. Just slightly. But it was enough. "Then they lied," she said, recovering quickly. "Someone is trying to turn you against me, to destroy what we're meant to build together." Or, the Alpha King said slowly, "You decided fate was taking too long." Seraphine's eyes hardened. The mask slipped. "She doesn't belong here," Seraphine said, her voice losing its softness. "You know it. The pack knows it. Even she knows it. I was simply expediting the inevitable. By murdering her in front of my son. By removing a problem before it destroys everything." Seraphine's composure shattered. How long will you let this continue? A human has claimed your heir's loyalty. Prophecy is being mocked. The pack is fracturing. And you do nothing because you're too weak to make the hard choice. The words hung in the air like poison. The Alpha King's expression didn't change. Get out. Excuse me? You're no longer welcome in this house. In this territory. You have until dawn to leave. Seraphine stared at him, disbelief flooding her face. You're banishing me? For her? I'm banishing you for attempting to murder someone under my protection. For defying my direct order. And for proving that prophecy chose wrong. Prophecy doesn't choose wrong. Seraphine's voice rose to a shriek. I am your destined mate. I am meant to be queen. The moon goddess herself. Made a mistake, the Alpha King finished quietly. The room went silent. Seraphine's face twisted with rage, and something else. Something desperate. You'll regret this, she whispered. Fate doesn't forgive. And neither do I. She turned and swept from the room, her footsteps echoing down the hall. The FMC stood in the corner, clutching her bleeding shoulder, barely able to process what had just happened. The Alpha King had chosen her. Not because he loved her, not because he believed in her, but because Seraphine had crossed a line. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. This isn't over, he said. Seraphine has allies. The council will demand answers. And the pack. He trailed off. Will hate me more than ever, the FMC finished. Yes. She nodded slowly. So, what happens now? The Alpha King looked at his son, small, terrified, still clinging to him like the world might end. Now, he said quietly, we find out if choice is stronger than destiny. He met her eyes. And pray we survive long enough to see the answer. Next time, the Alpha King makes his choice public, and the consequences shake the kingdom to its core. Chapter 8, The Alpha's Choice. By dawn, the entire kingdom knew. Seraphine was gone. Banished. Stripped of her title and her claim to the throne. And the humans still lived. The council convened at sunrise, not by request, but by demand. The elders, the advisors, the pack leaders, all of them gathered in the great hall, their expressions ranging from confusion to outrage. The Alpha King stood before them, Kate at his side, and behind them both the FMC. She'd been given clean clothes. Her shoulder had been bandaged, but no amount of washing could hide what she was. Human. Powerless. Alive. Theron stepped forward, his weathered face grave. You owe us an explanation. I owe you nothing, the Alpha King said coldly. But I'll give you one anyway. He gestured to the FMC. This woman was thrown off a cliff by her own pack. She survived against impossible odds and washed onto our shores. My son claimed her. And when she was threatened, when assassins were sent to murder her in the night, I made a choice. To banish your destined mate, one of the elders hissed. To reject prophecy itself. To protect my son. From what? Another council member demanded. From a bond that should never have formed in the first place? From a woman, the Alpha King said quietly, who sent killers into my home. Silence. Seraphine tried to have this human murdered, he continued. In front of Cade. In his own room. She prioritized prophecy over my son's well-being. Over his choice. And when her assassins failed, she showed no remorse. Because the human is a threat, the elder slammed his hand on the table. She disrupts order. She challenges fate. She represents everything our laws were built to prevent. She represents, the Alpha King countered, what happens when we value prophecy more than the people it's supposed to serve. The room erupted. Voices overlapped, accusations, arguments, demands. The FMC stood frozen, feeling the weight of their hatred pressing down on her like a physical force. And then Cade spoke. She saved me. His voice was small, childlike, but it cut through the chaos like a blade. The council fell silent. Cade stepped forward, his golden eyes bright with unshed tears. When the bad wolves came, she didn't run. She stood in front of me even though she can't fight. even though she knew they'd kill her. He looked up at his father. She chose me, when no one else did. The Alpha King's jaw tightened. Theron's expression softened, just slightly. The boy doesn't understand what he's asking. He understands perfectly, the Alpha King said. Better than any of us. He turned to the council. You want me to break his bond? To tear away the first person he's ever trusted? To teach him that loyalty means nothing in the face of tradition? We want you to uphold the laws that keep this pack strong, Theron replied. Then the laws are wrong. The words echoed through the chamber. I've spent my entire reign following prophecy, the Alpha King continued, believing that fate knew better than I did, that destiny would guide us to strength. But prophecy gave me a mate who valued power over compassion, who saw my son as an obstacle instead of a child. He placed a hand on Cade's shoulder. My son chose someone who protected him, who stayed when she could have run, who asked for nothing except the chance to survive. He looked at the FMC. And I choose to honor that. The silence that followed was deafening. You're making her your mate, one of the elders whispered, horrified. No, the Alpha King said firmly. I'm making her pack. Gasps rippled through the room. She has no wolf. She has my son's loyalty. And mine. That's enough. The pack will never accept this. Then they'll learn to. The Alpha King's voice turned to steel. I am your alpha.
My word is law.
And I'm declaring this woman under permanent protection. Anyone who harms her answers to me. Directly. He stepped forward, his presence filling the room. You can challenge this decision. You can leave. You can even try to overthrow me. But know this, if you choose that path, you choose war. With me. And with every wolf who believes that choice matters more than prophecy. No one moved. No one spoke. The Alpha King turned to the FMC. Do you accept this protection? She stared at him, barely able to breathe.
Why?
Because my son needs you. And because... He paused, something unreadable crossing his face. Because you've proven you deserve it. The FMC's eyes burned with tears.
Yes.
I accept. He nodded. Then, in a gesture that shocked everyone, including her, he took her hand. Not romantically, not possessively, but publicly. A declaration. This human is pack, he announced. Anyone who disagrees can bring their challenge to me directly. The council dispersed in stunned silence. Some left shaking their heads. Others muttered darkly. A few looked thoughtful. But they left, and the FMC remained. That night, Kate slept between them in the Alpha King's chambers, a compromise until new arrangements could be made. The boy was out within minutes, exhausted from the day's chaos. The FMC sat by the window, staring out at the forest. Her shoulders still ached. Her mind still reeled. The Alpha King stood in the doorway, watching her. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, I did. They'll never forgive you. They'll adapt. He crossed the room, stopping a few feet away. I've spent my entire life doing what was expected, following prophecy.
Honoring tradition.
And it brought me a mate who tried to murder a child's chosen bond. He looked at Cade, sleeping peacefully. I won't make that mistake again. The FMC met his gaze. What happens now?
Now.
A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Now we see if we can build something better than fate ever planned. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, you were right. About what? Cade didn't choose you by mistake. The Alpha King's golden eyes softened. He chose you because you're exactly what this pack needs. And what's that? Someone who fights for what's right, not what's easy. The FMC sat in the darkness long after he left, replaying his words. She'd survived execution, survived drowning, survived assassination, and now, impossibly, she'd survived prophecy itself. But as she looked at Cade's sleeping form, she realized something. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about belonging. And for the first time in her life, she thought she might actually deserve it. Next time, the human rises, and fate learns that some queens are chosen, not destined. Chapter 9, The queen fate couldn't kill. 3 months passed. The pack adjusted.
Slowly.
Reluctantly. But they adjusted. Some wolves still sneered when the FMC walked past. Others whispered behind their hands. But no one challenged her. Not openly. Not with the Alpha King's declaration still echoing through the kingdom.
She was pack now.
Protected. Recognized.
Alive.
And Cade never left her side. He'd grown in those 3 months, taller, stronger, more confident. His wolf form was sleeker now, his instincts sharper. But he still brought her stones from the river. To remind you, he'd say. She finally asked him what they were supposed to remind her of. He'd looked at her like the answer was obvious. That you're supposed to be here. The Alpha King watched them from a distance. He'd kept his word. Given her a proper room in the main wing. Ensured she was fed, clothed, protected. Treated her with the respect due to someone under his permanent decree. But something had shifted between them. It started small, conversations that lasted longer than necessary. Glances that held more weight than they should. Moments where his hand would brush hers and neither of them would pull away. The FMC tried to ignore it. He was the Alpha King. She was human. And despite everything, she knew her place. But Cade noticed. Father likes you, the boy said one afternoon, completely unprompted. The FMC nearly choked on her tea.
What?
He does. He smiles more when you're around. And he asks about you when you're not. Cade. It's okay, the boy continued, grinning. I like it. You make him less scary. The FMC didn't know what to say to that. The council called for a gathering on the first full moon after Seraphine's banishment. The entire pack assembled in the ceremonial grounds, a massive clearing surrounded by ancient stones. Torches burned. Wolves shifted between forms. The air thrummed with anticipation. The Alpha King stood at the center, Cade beside him. And this time, he'd asked the FMC to stand with them. Are you sure? She'd asked when he told her. I'm sure. So here she was, in front of hundreds of wolves.
Exposed.
Vulnerable.
Human.
The Alpha King raised his hand, and silence fell. 3 months ago, he began, his voice carrying across the clearing, I made a choice that defied prophecy. I banished my destined mate. I rejected fate. And I declared a human as pack. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some of you supported that choice. Others opposed it. Many of you are still undecided. He paused. But tonight, I ask you to witness what that choice has brought us. He gestured to Cade. The boy stepped forward, shifting into his wolf form. He was beautiful, black fur gleaming in the torchlight, golden eyes bright with intelligence. And he was strong. Stronger than any pup his age should be. My son has thrived, the Alpha King said. Not because prophecy told him who to bond with, but because he chose someone who saw him as more than a title, more than an heir, someone who valued him as a child. Cade padded over to the FMC and sat at her feet, leaning against her leg. The gesture was simple, innocent, but its meaning was clear. This is my pack. This is my choice. The Alpha King's gaze swept the crowd. I will not force you to accept her. But I will ask you to see what I see, someone who has given everything for a child who needed her. Someone who has survived impossible odds because fate itself couldn't kill her. He turned to the FMC. Come here. Her heart hammered. But she moved forward. The Alpha King took her hand. This time, deliberately.
Publicly.
This woman, he said, his voice strong and clear, is not my destined mate. She is not prophesied. She is not chosen by the moon goddess. He met her eyes. She is chosen by me. The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Others shouted in protest. The noise was deafening. But through it all, the Alpha King didn't let go of her hand. I declare her, he continued, raising his voice above the chaos, as my chosen queen, mate to the Alpha, mother to the heir, and leader of this pack. The FMC's breath caught. What? Do you accept? He asked quietly just for her. She stared at him. At this man who had every reason to let her die. who had defied his entire kingdom to protect his son's choice, who was now offering her everything she'd never dared to dream of. "Yes," she whispered. "I accept." He smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine, and then he kissed her. The pack's reaction was chaos. Half cheered, half protested. A few challenged. But the Alpha King faced each one with unwavering resolve. "Anyone who refuses to accept my queen," he declared, "can leave. I will not force loyalty, but I will not tolerate disrespect." One by one, the dissenters quieted. Some left. Most stayed. And slowly, impossibly, the pack began to kneel. Not because prophecy commanded it, but because their alpha had chosen. And choice, they were learning, was stronger than destiny. Epilogue. 2 years later, the FMC stood on the balcony of the palace, watching Cade race through the training grounds. He was 10 now, still young, but already showing signs of the leader he'd become. Strong, compassionate,
Brave.
everything a king should be. Arms wrapped around her waist from behind. "He's incredible," the Alpha King murmured, resting his chin on her shoulder. "He is," she agreed. "Because you let him choose."
No.
He turned her to face him. "Because you are worth choosing." She smiled, leaning into his warmth. They'd faced resistance. Challenges. Wolves who refused to accept a human queen. But they'd survived. Because fate had tried to kill her. And she'd refused to die. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Choosing me over prophecy?" He kissed her forehead. "Every day I wake up beside you. I'm grateful prophecy was wrong." Below, Cade shifted into his wolf form and howled, joyful, free, alive. The sound echoed across the kingdom. A kingdom built not on destiny, but on choice and love, and the unshakable belief that sometimes the best queens aren't the ones fate crowns. They're the ones who refuse to let fate win.
The end.
Thank you for listening to Megan Romance Audiobooks. If you loved this story of fate defied and destiny rewritten, please subscribe for more tales of love, loyalty, and the strength to choose your own path. Until next time, may you always be brave enough to choose what's right over what's written.